Clapperboard Part 1. The silent gaze that changes everything. From the first glance, Scorpio already knows. There's a moment, rare and unsettling, when you feel truly seen. Not the kind of seen that flatters your appearance or notices your style. No, this is deeper, ancient, intimate. It's as if someone has opened a book you didn't know was being written inside your soul and begun reading aloud every page. That's the Scorpio effect. They walk into a room without a word, and yet, the atmosphere shifts. People straighten their backs. Some get nervous. Others feel drawn in without knowing why. Scorpio hasn't even spoken yet, but their energy has already started scanning the truth beneath the noise. Scorpion, what makes Scorpio different from the start? Scorpio isn't just another zodiac sign. It's a force field, a vibration, a frequency tuned to truth, raw, unfiltered, often inconvenient, but always real. Where some signs look at life through a sunny lens or a logical framework, Scorpio lives beneath the surface. They were born to explore the hidden corridors of human experience. While others crave clarity, Scorpio craves depth. And in that depth, they discover what others miss entirely. Their ruling planets say it all: Pluto, the underworld ruler of death and rebirth, and Mars, the ancient god of war. This dual influence makes them both still and explosive, observant and commanding. A paradox in motion. Magnifying glass tilted left the Scorpio scan, more than observation. You think they're just listening to you talk. But while you speak, they're measuring the tremble in your voice, the hesitation in your laugh, the vacancy in your eyes when you say you're fine. They read between syllables. They detect emotional temperature the way some people detect weather changes. You can't lie to a Scorpio, not because they're mind readers, but because they notice everything you don't say. This isn't about suspicion. It's sacred instinct. And it's never passive. Candle A story you won't forget. The girl at the funeral. Let me tell you a true story. A Scorpio named Julian once attended the funeral of a coworker's father. She didn't know the family well, but something told her to go. When she arrived, the room was filled with grief, black suits, and polite murmurs. But her eyes found one young girl in the corner, alone, looking calm, even smiling faintly. People assumed she was handling it well. But Julianne knew. She sat beside her and whispered gently, "You don't have to be strong for them. It's okay to fall apart." And just like that, the girl burst into tears, years of bottled-up sorrow finally released. No one else saw it coming, but Julianne did. That's Scorpio sight. The ability to pierce through a perfectly painted mask and see the crack beneath. Crystal ball, the sacred role of Scorpio, seeing beyond the illusion. This is why Scorpios are feared and revered. They don't just witness. They decode. They don't settle for appearances. They demand the essence. And this doesn't just apply to people. Scorpios sense when something in the air is wrong long before it becomes obvious to others. When society is on the brink of a shift, when a relationship is heading toward collapse, when a person is hiding something from themselves, Scorpio feels it. Why? Because they've lived it. Scorpios are forged in personal transformation. They've had to die emotionally to be reborn again and again. They are not afraid of shadows. In fact, they befriend them. Broken heart, the pain of being the one who sees. But here's the shadow side. Seeing everything means carrying things no one else understands. Imagine walking through life feeling people's grief before they've spoken, sensing betrayal before it happens, noticing insincerity in a loved one's smile. It's a heavy gift. Many Scorpios struggle with loneliness, not because they're antisocial, but because they crave truth so deeply, most small talk feels suffocating. They'd rather be alone in silence than surrounded by masks. DNA, it's not learned. It's lived. What Scorpio sees can't be taught in books. You can't study this in psychology or body language courses. It's intuitive, cellular, an inheritance passed down from the stars through Pluto's ancient bloodline. Other signs learn. Scorpio remembers. They remember the way a mother's tone can betray disappointment. The way a friend's absence during your darkest hours speaks louder than their words ever could. The way silence can scream. Repeat button, closing reflection, and a bridge to what's next. Scorpio's gift is not easy to live with, but it is sacred. They are the ones who see what others ignore, not to hurt, but to heal. They don't look away from the ugly, the uncomfortable, or the buried. They dive in. And in that act of courage, they bring something rare and beautiful into the world: honest illumination. In Part 2, we'll explore the layers behind Scorpio's intensity. Why do they sometimes come off as too much? What lies beneath their stillness? And how does their presence become a catalyst for transformation even when they don't say a word? Because make no mistake, when When Scorpio enters your life, something in you will change. Permanently. Clapperboard Part 2. Why Scorpio doesn't miss the details that matter. When others listen to words, Scorpio listens to energy. Magnifying glass still to dry to truth hidden in plain sight. Scorpio doesn't need you to confess. They already know. Long before you realize you're hiding something, they've sensed the vibration of that truth sitting beneath your words. Where others rely on what's said, Scorpio tunes into what isn't. They aren't detectives in the traditional sense. They're not waiting for clues. They feel the full picture the moment it enters the room. Not because they want to control the narrative, but because they can't not notice. Brain, not intelligence. Inner knowing. This is not about IQ or learned skill. It's about alignment with shadow, silence, and soul. Scorpio doesn't scan people to be suspicious. It's more like an instinctual drive to understand what's real. They're allergic to fakeness, to surface-level conversations, to the emptiness behind smiles. Give them shallow compliments and they'll look right past it. Tell them everything's fine with a tremor in your voice. They'll gently pause, tilt their head, and give you that look. You know the one. The look that says, "You don't have to pretend with me." And suddenly, you're crying. You didn't mean to, but you felt safe in their gaze. Safe enough to be real. That's the Scorpio difference. Thread a story from a therapist's couch. A client once told me about her Scorpio husband. She had been feeling off for weeks. Anxious, disconnected, even confused about her own needs. She hadn't said anything out loud. Not even a sigh. One evening, while folding laundry in silence, he simply asked, "Why are you carrying sadness that isn't yours?" She froze. Not because he was wrong, but because he was so right, and no one had ever seen it, not even herself. Scorpio doesn't need full context to understand your pain. They trace emotional threads like a psychic tailor, following the stitching that holds your life together until they find where it's unraveling. DNA. Why Scorpio can't unsee things. Once Scorpio senses a truth, they can't ignore it. They may not speak it aloud, but it sits with them like a frequency that won't go away. This is their curse and their calling. They pick up on things others miss. The way someone's voice tightens when talking about their childhood. The forced laughter that masks a recent betrayal. The coldness in a hug that used to feel warm. To Scorpio, these aren't coincidences. They're messages. Their ability is like sonar, bouncing signals off the emotional terrain of others, feeling what's real even when it's buried under layers of performance. Woman in lotus position. Scorpio in stillness, a magnet for the unsaid. Sometimes it's in the silence that the loudest truths are heard. And Scorpio is fluent in silence. Sit beside a Scorpio long enough, and the things you never intended to say will rise like vapor. It's not mind control, it's magnetic authenticity. Their presence naturally draws out honesty. Why? Because they don't flinch. They're not shocked by trauma. They don't recoil at darkness. They've swum in those waters before many times. And they've come back wiser, stronger, more grounded. So when they look at you and say, "I see you," it's not judgment. It's sacred witnessing. Fire when a Scorpio confronts the lie you tell yourself. One of Scorpio's most terrifying gifts is not exposing your lie to the world. It's exposing the lie you tell yourself. You say, "I'm okay." They raise an eyebrow. You insist, "I've moved on." They lean forward and softly ask, "Have you really?" And suddenly, the illusion you built so carefully crumbles. Not because they forced it to, but because they saw right through it and gently invited you to drop the act. That's their power. It's not destruction. It's awakening. Speech balloon. Scorpio and the language beneath language. In ancient traditions, there's a belief that real communication happens not through words, but through energy. Scorpio lives this. They listen with their entire body, the skin, the gut, the breath. A conversation with them isn't just what you say, but what your soul whispers behind the sentence. They hear the sorrow under your sarcasm. They notice the tremble behind your confidence. They sense the shame behind your strength. To them, truth has layers, and they won't stop peeling until they reach the core. Being around Scorpio feels like being under a mirror. Here's the catch. Being around a Scorpio isn't always comfortable. You may feel naked. You may feel confronted. You may even want to run. But if you stay, if you allow yourself to be seen, you'll find a strange, profound liberation. Because finally, someone gets it. Someone sees all of you and doesn't look away. Milky Way closing and the road ahead. This is why Scorpio doesn't miss what matters. They don't just observe, they embody presence. And in doing so, they become a living mirror for those around them. But what happens when that gift becomes a burden? What toll does it take on Scorpio to carry the truths others ignore? In part 3, we'll explore the emotional cost of being the one who always knows, the silent battles Scorpio fights, and how their depth, while often misunderstood, is actually a sacred form of emotional bravery. Because seeing the unseen isn't easy. But for Scorpio, it's destiny. Clapperboard Part 3, when seeing too much becomes a burden. To see what others miss is to carry what others cannot. Crystal Ball, the unseen price of perception. Scorpio doesn't ask for this power. They are born into it, eyes wide open, hearts wired for resonance, skin sensitive to frequencies the world pretends don't exist. They don't just walk into a room, they feel the temperature shift in a heartbeat. They don't just hear what's said, they absorb what's held back. They don't just love you, they merge with your sorrow. And while this is a gift, it's also a wound. A wound that never fully heals because every truth they uncover slices a little deeper into the soul. Brick, why Scorpio often seems distant. People sometimes say Scorpios are too quiet, too intense, or too reserved. But what most don't realize is that Scorpio doesn't distance themselves out of ego, they distance to protect themselves from emotional saturation. Because when you can see through everyone, you start to ache for everyone. You ache for the girl pretending to be happy in her marriage. You ache for the man who jokes to cover his depression. You ache for the child within the adult, still hoping someone will choose them. And this ache becomes chronic if Scorpio doesn't retreat and cleanse. Waterwave, they don't drown in pain, they hold it until it breaks them. There is a reason Scorpio is associated with water, not calm lake water, but deep, uncharted, abyss-like water. The kind you can't stand in. The kind that swallows and reveals at the same time. They're emotional divers. They don't skim the surface. They go straight to the ocean floor and bring back pieces of your soul you didn't know were lost. But here's the truth no one wants to admit. Sometimes they bring back too much, and they have nowhere to put it. The black hole effect. When Scorpio absorbs too much. Have you ever met someone who listens so deeply, you end up confessing things you never meant to? That's Scorpio. People unload their grief, trauma, fears, and guilt onto them. Not because they want to use them, but because Scorpio feels safe, like a vault that will never break. But even a vault can get full. Scorpio will never say it out loud. They'll never blame you. But inside, their emotional system is overstimulated. Their soul becomes a black hole, dense with other people's suffering. And one day, they implode silently. That's why Scorpio disappears without warning. This is why Scorpios vanish from your life with no explanation. They don't ghost out of spite. They disappear to breathe, to release the energetic weight they've been carrying for far too long. And when they return, if they return, it's with clearer eyes, stronger boundaries, and a deeper sense of self-preservation. You may feel hurt by their silence, but know this, their absence was a form of survival, not punishment. Key, the unseen armor of Scorpio. What looks like coldness is often armor. Scorpio has likely been betrayed by the very people they healed. They were there when no one else was. Held space, offered insight, helped others through their darkest seasons. But when they needed someone, silence, distance, abandonment. So they learned not to ask, not to expect, not to need. They became their own sanctuary, their own healer, their own home. But deep down, they still long for one person who sees them as clearly as they see others. Waning crescent moon, Scorpio's shadow. Hyperempathy becomes isolation. Here's something few talk about. Scorpio's intensity can become their own prison. When you constantly pick up on what others are avoiding, when you're aware of every lie, every game, every wound, it becomes hard to trust, to relax, to just be. You start seeing relationships as potential burdens. You guard your peace like a dragon guards gold. You fear emotional intimacy not because you don't crave it, but because you know the cost of absorbing another soul's weight. Scorpio doesn't fear closeness. They fear drowning in someone else's pain. Man in lotus position, what helps Scorpio heal. So how do they recover? Not through talk, not through therapy, though some benefit from it, but through solitude, nature, water, fire, ritual, a silent night sky under the stars, the sound of rain echoing on rooftops, the flicker of a candle flame in a dark room, journaling until the truth bleeds out, music that hurts until it heals. Scorpio doesn't need fixing. They need sacred space to remember who they are beneath the weight they carry. Candle, a lesson from Scorpio to the world. If there's one thing Scorpio teaches us, it's this. Just because someone is strong enough to carry your pain doesn't mean they don't feel it too. They may not complain. They may never ask for help, but they feel more than most can comprehend. So if you love a Scorpio, do something rare. See them. Ask about their pain. Hold them when they're tired. Protect their peace the way they protect yours. They won't ask for it, but they will never forget that you did. Milky Way transition to Part 4. In Part 4, we explore the mysterious magnetism of Scorpio, the energy that pulls others in, the aura that feels like gravity, the gaze that makes people confess their entire emotional history in 5 minutes. Because even under all this weight, Scorpio still shines like a black star. Quiet, immense, unforgettable. Clapperboard Part 4. The magnetic truth of Scorpio. They don't speak to be heard. They exist to be felt. Magnet the gravity you can't explain. Walk into a room, and your eyes will be drawn to one person without knowing why. They may not be talking. They may not even be looking at you. But something about them pulls you in. Something ancient. Something untamed. That's the Scorpio magnetism. It's not about beauty. It's not even about confidence. It's about presence. And Scorpio's presence is undeniable. They don't chase attention. Attention finds them. Like iron filings drawn to a hidden magnet beneath the surface. Milky Way, what is this magnetism? Really? Scorpio's magnetic power comes from several forces converging within them. Stillness that commands attention. They don't speak until they mean it, and that silence becomes a spotlight. Emotional depth. They carry storms inside them, and others instinctively know there's more to uncover. Mysterious aura. You never quite know what they're thinking, and that uncertainty is irresistible. Unapologetic authenticity. They don't fake anything. And in a world drowning in masks, their truth becomes magnetic. They aren't loud. They don't need to be. Their energy speaks louder than words ever could. Brain, the psychology behind Scorpio's pull. There's a reason why people confess secrets to Scorpios, even when they barely know them. It's because Scorpio doesn't judge. Scorpio doesn't interrupt. Scorpio watches and feels and remembers. And most importantly, Scorpio makes people feel seen. Not superficially, but soul deep. In a world obsessed with validation, most people are starving to be witnessed, not just admired, not just liked, but witnessed in their full, messy truth. And Scorpio has the gift and the gaze that does exactly that. Nizar Amuleta's story, The Silent Stranger. A woman once told this story. She was on a train, emotionally exhausted, hiding her tears behind sunglasses. Across from her sat a man, silent, still, reading a book. He looked up once and held her gaze, not long enough to be invasive, but just long enough that she felt something break inside her. When she got off the train, she turned to thank him, but he was already gone. She didn't know his name, but she said she felt more understood in that one glance. Then in months of therapy, that's what Scorpio's presence does. It's not about interaction. It's about energy resonance. Fire, the power of contained fire. Scorpio energy is like fire behind glass, controlled, but undeniable. People feel that heat, even if they can't explain it. It's in the way they move, the way they pause before speaking, the way their silence stretches without needing to be filled. There's a sacred tension in Scorpio's stillness, like standing near lightning just before it strikes. That energy, that potential, that mystery, draws others like moss to a sacred flame. High voltage, why others confess their secrets to Scorpio. It happens all the time. A coworker opens up about a trauma from years ago. A stranger on a plane pours out their entire love life. A friend reveals things they've never told anyone else. And Scorpio never asks, "Why are you telling me this?" Because they already know. When someone feels seen, not for who they pretend to be, but for who they are underneath, the soul craves to speak. Scorpio doesn't need to pry. They simply exist. And that's invitation enough. Gemstone, the diamond in the darkness. What truly makes Scorpio magnetic is this. They've done their shadow work. They've been to hell emotionally. They've faced their demons. They've held their own hand in the dark. So when you stand before them, broken or scared or ashamed, they're not shaken. They see you, and they don't look away. And that becomes the safest space in the world. Lightbulb, why people say, "I don't know what it is about you." Because Scorpio doesn't broadcast themselves. They vibrate on a deeper frequency. And those attuned to truth, healing, and transformation feel that vibration instinctively. Empaths recognize it. Seekers are drawn to it. Even those still hiding from their truth feel compelled to approach. Scorpio doesn't need to sell themselves. They don't need to perform. They are. And that being speaks volumes. Magnetism and the mirror effect. There's also a deeper layer here. Scorpio's magnetism doesn't just pull people in, it also pulls people open. They act as emotional mirrors. What you feel around them is often what you've buried inside yourself. That's why some people feel scared of Scorpio without understanding why. They're not afraid of the person, they're afraid of being exposed. Afraid of their own truth, reflected back at them through Scorpio's gaze. Scorpio doesn't provoke that reaction on purpose. It's just who they are. They're truth incarnate. And truth, when unfiltered, is electric. Milky Way transition to part 5. So yes, Scorpio's magnetism is real. It's silent. It's spiritual. And it's impossible to resist. But what happens when people get too close and aren't ready for the truth Scorpio reveals? In part 5, the fallout of intimacy, we'll explore what it costs Scorpio when their magnetism draws in people who say, "I want to know you," but run the moment they see what lies beneath. Because magnetism is power. But power always has a price. Clapperboard Part 5, the fallout of intimacy. Everyone wants to be seen until Scorpio really sees them. Broken heart when magnetism attracts the unready. Scorpio's magnetism is undeniable. It draws people in like gravity. But what most forget is this: Scorpio doesn't do shallow. And that becomes the turning point. People say, "You're so intense, so fascinating, so real." But what they really mean is, "You make me feel things I'm not ready to feel." At first, they love the fire, the mystery, the emotional X-ray vision. But soon, they flinch. They pull back. They retreat into safe, shallow waters. And Scorpio is left standing alone, once again. Face without mouth fog, the truth that destroys illusions. When Scorpio connects with someone, they don't just want small talk. They want to know your soul, your fears, your shadows, your deepest longings. But that kind of intimacy? Most people aren't equipped for it. They're used to hiding, pretending, performing. So when Scorpio gently, wordlessly begins to see the truth beneath the mask, something terrifying happens. The other person sees it too, and they're not always ready to face it. Woman standing a story. The girl who left when it got too real. A Scorpio woman named Lean once fell in love with a man who said he craved emotional honesty. She gave it to him in her silence, her gaze, her unwavering presence. She didn't play games. She showed him the parts of her that were scarred, soft, sacred. At first, he was mesmerized. But as the months passed, he began to avoid eye contact. He joked more, opened less, until one day he said, "You're just too much. I feel like I can't hide anything around you." And he left. What he didn't realize was, that was never her intention. She wasn't trying to expose him. She was just being herself. And sometimes, being fully yourself is enough to make the unready run. Balance scale, the emotional contract Scorpio never signed. Here's the heartbreaking paradox. People want Scorpio's depth until they realize how much it demands of them. To be loved by a Scorpio is to be held to a standard of truth. Not perfection, but authenticity. And when people realize that faking it won't work, that they can't hide behind charm, performance, or emotional avoidance, they leave. But Scorpio never asked them to be perfect, only honest. The tragedy is, most people would rather be liked for a lie than loved for their truth. And Scorpio? Scorpio can't love the lie. Firecracker when intimacy becomes a threat. Scorpio doesn't just create romantic intimacy. They create soul intimacy. Even in friendship, even in family, their presence exposes emotional truths that others didn't even realize they were hiding. That's why some people fight with Scorpio for no reason. They feel threatened, not by words, but by being seen too clearly. Because to Scorpio, emotional intimacy isn't a risk. It's a requirement. And to others, that can feel like drowning. Repeat single button, the repeat pattern. Pulled in, pushed away. This is the most painful cycle for Scorpio. Someone is drawn to them like a moth to a flame. The connection deepens fast, emotionally, spiritually. The other person feels exposed. They retreat, attack, or disappear. Scorpio is left confused, hurt, and emotionally burnt. And yet, they rise again. Because the truth is, Scorpio is built for intensity. But the world often isn't. Shield why Scorpio builds stronger walls after every goodbye. Every time someone pulls away from their depth, Scorpio learns. They don't become colder, but they become wiser. They learn to withhold, to watch first, open later, to test the waters before diving in, not out of fear, but out of emotional survival. Because they know, not everyone who knocks is ready to enter. If you want a Scorpio, be ready to see yourself. To love a Scorpio, you have to be ready for the mirror. Because they will reflect the wounds you forgot you had, the dreams you gave up on, the strength you didn't know was there, the lies you still tell yourself, not through preaching, but through presence. That's why real intimacy with Scorpio is transformational. But transformation always requires a death first. A death of illusion, a death of masks, a death of avoidance. Repeat button and still. Scorpio loves anyway. Even after the betrayals, even after the ghosts, even after being told you're too much. Scorpio still loves. Deeply, quietly, bravely, because they know the right soul won't run. The right soul will stay. And that kind of connection, it's rare. But when it happens, it's eternal. Candle closing, and what's next? So yes, Scorpio's magnetism can draw people in, but it also burns away anything inauthentic. The fallout of intimacy is real, but so is the reward for those who choose to stay. In Part 6, Sacred Loyalty in the Scorpio Bond, we'll explore why Scorpio's loyalty is legendary and why betrayal cuts them deeper than any other sign. Because once a Scorpio lets you in, you don't just enter their heart, you enter their soul. Clapperboard Part 6, Sacred Loyalty in the Scorpio Bond. When Scorpio chooses you, they don't choose casually. They choose with their soul. Shield the loyalty that lives in silence. Scorpio doesn't throw around words like loyalty, forever, or ride or die. They don't need to. Because when a Scorpio decides you're theirs, it's not a performance. It's a soul agreement. They may not say it often, but they'll show it. By defending you in rooms you'll never walk into. By sensing when you're in pain without you needing to speak. By staying when everyone else walks away. Scorpio love is quiet, but it is unshakable. New Moon the depth behind their devotion. To Scorpio, loyalty isn't about being useful or never fighting. It's about showing up when it matters most. They bond at a cellular level. When they choose someone, it's because their soul has whispered, this is one of mine. And once the bond is formed, Scorpio guards it with fire. They'll forgive the mood swings. They'll endure distance. They'll fight with you, but never against you. Unless you break the sacred code. Brick why Scorpio doesn't bond easily. Here's what most people don't see. Scorpio is slow to trust for a reason. They've been betrayed before. By lovers, friends, even family. They've given people their heart, only to watch it be mishandled. They've opened up, only to be used. So now, they test. They observe. They wait. Because they don't want another bond that ends in blood. Valence Gale's story. The friend who passed the test. There was once a Scorpio man named Elias who had one friend, Martin, who stayed with him during a mental health spiral. Elias didn't respond to texts. He stopped showing up. Others gave up. Martin didn't. Every day, Martin messaged, "I'm here if you ever need me." He never demanded. He never guilt. Just presence. After months, Elias resurfaced. Quiet, raw, grateful. That moment forged an unbreakable bond. Years later, Elias said, "There are only two people I'd take a bullet for. Martin is one of them." That's Scorpio. Once you pass their test of time, silence, and storms, you're family. For life. Fire why betrayal burns so deeply. But here's the other side. Because Scorpio loves deeply, betrayal doesn't just sting, it scars. Not because they're sensitive in a petty way, but because they gave you everything. Their trust, their darkness, their sacred self. And when that trust is broken, it's not just disappointment. It's a spiritual fracture. To betray a Scorpio is to destroy a sacred bond. And while they may not explode, they will vanish. Not as punishment, but because something inside them has died and cannot be resurrected. When Scorpio walks away, it's already too late. Scorpios don't leave impulsively. They leave silently after months, sometimes years, of emotional erosion. They'll forgive small things. They'll overlook flaws. They'll wait, hoping you'll return to alignment. But once they reach that internal breaking point, the door closes. Not with rage, not with drama, just stillness. And no matter how loud you knock after that, they won't open it again. Because they gave you everything once. And you taught them it wasn't safe. Waxing crescent moon forgiveness is possible, but rare. Yes, Scorpio can forgive, but not quickly, and not for everyone. You'll need to prove that your remorse is real, that your behavior is changed, that your intentions are pure. And even then, you may get their compassion, but not their closeness. Because once a Scorpio rebuilds themselves after betrayal, they build higher walls. Milky Way, why their loyalty is legendary. Scorpio loyalty isn't loud. It's sacred. They won't post about it. They won't demand credit. But they'll be there when you're at your lowest. Everyone else turns away. You feel like no one understands. And they won't fix you. They'll stand with you in the fire, in the dark, in the quiet. And that kind of loyalty? It's not just rare. It's holy. Light bulb if you're loved by a Scorpio. Don't take it lightly. Because when they say, "I got you," they mean, "I'll carry your grief if you can't. I'll protect your secrets with my life. And if the whole world turns on you, I'll still be here, holding your truth." But don't mistake their silence for weakness. Don't confuse their forgiveness for forgetfulness. And never, ever play with their heart. Because Scorpio doesn't love halfway. And they don't leave halfway either. But when they do leave, they never look back. Candle closing, and what's next? In Part 7, Scorpio's emotional alchemy, will explore how bocap doesn't just feel deeply, they transform pain into power. We'll uncover their inner rituals of healing, how they rise from emotional destruction, and why Scorpio is the zodiac's true alchemist. Because loyalty is only the beginning. Transformation is where Scorpio's real magic begins. Clapperboard Part 7, Scorpio's emotional alchemy. Some signs survive pain. Scorpio transmutes it. Fire the alchemist within. Pain breaks some people. It hardens others. But with Scorpio, pain transforms them. Not instantly, not easily, but completely. Scorpio doesn't numb it, doesn't run from it. They invite pain in, sit with it, name it, grieve it, and then, when ready, they burn it to ash and rise again, reborn. This is emotional alchemy, and Scorpio is its master. Waxing crescent moon, the descent comes first. Transformation doesn't begin with light. It begins in darkness. Scorpio knows this better than anyone. When betrayal comes, when love fails, when everything falls apart, Scorpio doesn't fake positivity. They descend into silence, into sorrow, into solitude. This isn't weakness. It's ritual. It's the first stage of alchemy, the breakdown, where illusions shatter and truth is laid bare. Candle A story, the ashes of a dream. Let me tell you about Lena, a Scorpio who dreamed of building her own art studio. She poured years of savings and soul into it, only to be betrayed by her business partner, who left with the money and the brand. It devastated her. She disappeared for 6 months. No posts, no calls, silence. Everyone thought she gave up. But one night, she reappeared with a new brand. Fiercer, more personal, more raw. She called it Ashes and Gold. And every piece she created carried the scars of her journey. Today, she runs one of the most successful emotional art brands in her city. That's Scorpio. They don't bounce back. They evolve. Waterwave, they don't heal to be happy. They heal to be powerful. Other signs might seek quick relief. Scorpio seeks full transformation. They ask, what did this pain come to teach me? What illusion just died? What part of me must be reborn? They don't want to return to who they were before the pain. They want to become someone entirely new. And the version of them that emerges? Wiser, sharper, undefeated. Scorpion, the eagle, the phoenix. Scorpio is the only sign with 3 evolutionary forms. The scorpion, defensive, reactive, grounded in survival. The eagle, visionary, rising above chaos, seeking clarity. The phoenix, burned to nothing, then reborn in sacred fire. Most people only ever meet the scorpion. Some are blessed to witness the eagle. But the phoenix? That version of Scorpio only appears after their deepest heartbreak, after the fire, after the fall. And when they rise, they become unstoppable. Gear their process of alchemy, the hidden stages. 1. Collapse, emotional implosion, silent withdrawal. 2. Containment, solitude, energetic cleansing, deep journaling. 3. Extraction, identifying the root cause of the pain. 4. Transmutation, transforming sorrow into art, wisdom, vision. 5. Ascension, returning stronger, clearer, spiritually aligned. No one teaches them this. They live it. Every major heartbreak becomes a personal rebirth ritual. DNA, why they're natural shamans. Shamans in ancient cultures weren't chosen because they were perfect. They were chosen because they survived their own death and came back with vision. That's Scorpio. Their emotional deaths give them access to hidden layers of consciousness. The silence beneath grief. the purpose behind betrayal, the healing buried inside rage. That's why others come to them when life collapses. Because Scorpio has been there, and they know how to guide others through the flames. Gemstone, they turn scar tissue into strength. Scorpio doesn't hide their scars. They wield them. Every heartbreak becomes a compass. Every loss becomes a lesson. Every betrayal becomes a boundary. They don't just survive darkness. They become light within it. Their power doesn't scream, it radiates. Lightbulb, the lesson we can learn from Scorpio. Scorpio teaches us that healing isn't about moving on. It's about going in. It's about sitting with the wreckage, digging through the ashes, finding the gold beneath the grief. Because the real treasure isn't what was lost. It's what was forged in the fire. And Scorpio? Scorpio carries that treasure in their gaze. Candle closing, and what's next? In Part 8, the sacred relationship between Scorpio and silence. We'll dive into the mystical way Bo-Cap communicates without words. Why their silence is more powerful than speeches, how they listen beyond sound, and why the quiet around them is never empty. Because Scorpio doesn't just speak, they resonate. And in that resonance lies revelation. Clapperboard Part 8, the sacred relationship between Scorpio and silence. Their silence isn't empty. It's alive. Candle, the language no one teaches, but Scorpio speaks fluently. Scorpio doesn't fear silence. They live in it. They breathe through it. And more than anything, they listen in it. While the world races to fill space with sound, Scorpio holds back, still, focused, tuned into frequencies that only reveal themselves when the noise dies down. Because here's the truth. Silence speaks, and Scorpio hears it loudest. Man Lotus positions silence as a spiritual tool. For Scorpio, silence isn't just a pause between words. It's a spiritual tool, a shield, a mirror, and sometimes a weapon. They use silence to observe what's real, distinguish between sincerity and performance, create space for others to reveal themselves, retreat into deep emotional recalibration. While others get uncomfortable with silence, Scorpio becomes more powerful in it. Because in silence, the mask slips. And that's when the truth comes out. Magnifying glass still to write what they learn in the quiet moments. When you're sitting next to a Scorpio and neither of you is speaking, trust me, they're reading you. They're sensing the tightness in your breath, the slight delay in your eye contact, the energy pulsing off your body. They're not waiting for you to talk. They're already hearing what your energy is screaming. And if you say nothing at all, even better, because that's when Scorpio hears the most. Thubaluna's story, the boy who spoke with his silence. I once knew a Scorpio boy named Theo. He rarely spoke in class. Teachers called him shy, classmates assumed he was unfriendly. But one day, a girl sat next to him crying quietly after lunch. She never said a word. Theo didn't ask what happened. He didn't hand her tissues. He just sat there quiet, grounded, present. After 10 minutes, she stopped crying. She whispered, "Thank you." Theo replied, "You're welcome." It was the most powerful exchange I'd ever witnessed, done entirely in silence. That's Scorpio. They don't need to fix the pain. They hold space for it. Rick, why they go silent in conflict. When Scorpio goes silent during an argument, it doesn't mean they've given up. It means they're processing everything. Not just the words, but the tone, the intent, the energy shift behind it. And if you keep pushing them to speak before they're ready, they'll go deeper into themselves. Not out of spite, out of protection. Because Scorpio doesn't speak from reaction. They speak from truth. And truth takes time to form completely. Hourglass not done timing is their superpower. Scorpio doesn't rush responses. They wait. Why? Because they know that silence reveals what words hide. They'll let the silence stretch just long enough for the other person to betray themselves through a nervous overshare, fill the gap with lies, or reveal their real emotions by accident. Scorpio's silence isn't passivity. It's strategy. And more than that, it's spiritual listening. Milk away the mystical nature of their quiet. Scorpio's silence is more than emotional, it's energetic. In their stillness, they commune with ancestors, reflect on karmic cycles, hear messages that don't come through speech, realign with cosmic timing. That's why people feel calmer around a quiet Scorpio. It's like standing beside a still, deep lake that's seen storms and survived. Their silence grounds you, even when it scares you. Spiderweb, why they withhold words. Scorpio doesn't speak to fill silence. They speak when words are necessary. They understand that truth isn't always ready to be spoken, that the right word, at the wrong time can harm. That language is sacred and should never be wasted. And that's why their words land so deeply when they do choose to speak. Because when a Scorpio says, "I forgive you. I see you. I'm done," it carries weight. You know it wasn't said lightly, and you feel it echo through your bones. Brain Scorpio's inner dialogue. Just because they're quiet doesn't mean their mind is. In silence, Scorpio is. Replaying conversations, mapping emotional landscapes, noticing inconsistencies, making connections others miss. They're mental investigators, constantly decoding the soul of the situation. And that's what makes them powerful communicators when they choose to be. Lightbulb, the lesson we can learn from Scorpio. Scorpio teaches us this. Silence isn't the absence of truth. It's where truth waits to be born. We live in a world obsessed with noise. But Scorpio reminds us that the sacred lies in the stillness. If we can sit in silence long enough, we will eventually hear the truth we've been avoiding, the answers we've been chasing, and the healing we've been too afraid to feel. Candle closing, and what's next? In Part 9, Scorpio and the Death Rebirth Code, we explore Scorpio's deepest archetype, the keeper of transformation, the one who walks through emotional, spiritual, and karmic death to bring back wisdom and power. Because after the silence comes resurrection. Clapperboard Part 9, Scorpio and the Death Rebirth Code. Some signs change. Scorpio transforms. Scorpion, the only zodiac sign that must die to become. Every Scorpio, in this life or the next, will go through a period where they feel like they've lost everything. Their identity, their relationship, their sense of control, sometimes even their will to keep going. But here's the truth most people never see. That breakdown isn't the end. It's the initiation. Because Scorpio is not a sign of comfort. It is the sign of sacred disintegration. They are not here to maintain the status quo. They are here to burn it down and become something more. Why death, symbolic or real, is in their DNA. Ruled by Pluto, the god of the underworld, Scorpio is cosmically wired to walk between worlds. The world of life and the world of death. The visible and the invisible. The physical and the spiritual. The ego and the soul. They don't fear the end. They understand that every ending is a doorway. And where most signs resist the fall, Scorpio leans into it. Because in the ashes, they find clarity. New Moon, a real-life Phoenix story. There was a woman named May, a Scorpio, whose world shattered when she lost her child unexpectedly. Grief swallowed her. She vanished from social media, stopped answering messages, refused to be consoled. People said she'll never recover. But she wasn't meant to recover. She was meant to transform. 2 years later, she re-emerged, not as who she was, but as something entirely reborn. She founded a grief healing organization that's now helped thousands of parents around the world. That is Scorpio. Not healed, not over it, but remade through it. Repeat button, the pattern of Phoenix people. Scorpios are what I call Phoenix people. They go through this cycle multiple times in a lifetime. 1. Destruction. Something core to their identity collapses. 2. Despair. They descend into emotional death. 3. Dormancy. A period of silence, retreat, invisibility. For distillation, extracting wisdom from suffering. 5. Rebirth. Re-emerging stronger, wiser, and more whole. And every time, they lose a part of themselves they didn't need. And gain something they were always meant to become. Crystal ball, why they're the mystics of the zodiac. This cycle of death and rebirth gives Scorpio access to truths most people will never touch. They understand impermanence. They know how to let go. They've met their shadow, and instead of fighting it, they learned from it. That's why they're drawn to tarot, astrology, psychology, mysticism. They don't just believe in the soul, they've watched it break and rebuild. So when they speak, you listen, because they've earned their wisdom in the flames. Coffin, the ego death most people avoid. Scorpio is not afraid to say, I was wrong. I don't recognize who I've become. This version of me must die. They understand that ego death is a sacred rite of passage. Others may cling to titles, labels, and relationships that feel safe. Scorpio? They'll walk away from all of it if their soul demands it. It's not easy, but it's necessary. Because they don't just want to exist, they want to evolve. DNA, the initiation of a true Scorpio. Every real Scorpio will face a life event that destroys them emotionally, mentally, spiritually. And while the world watches and whispers, they're done. Scorpio will go underground, will bleed in silence, will scream into the void. But then, they will build a new self out of the bones of the old one. And when they reemerge, They don't come back with revenge. They come back with vision. Fire, what we can all learn from Scorpio's rebirth code. Scorpio teaches us the most uncomfortable, but liberating truth of all. You don't have to be who you've always been. You're allowed to break. You're allowed to become someone else. You're allowed to be reborn. Their life is a living myth. A story of ashes turned into art. Of death turned into destiny. They are not survivors. They are transcenders. Candle closing, and what's next? In part 10, Scorpio in love, devotion, intensity, and the power to heal or destroy, we explore what it truly means to love a Scorpio and be loved by one. Because when a sign carries this much death and rebirth energy, their love can either burn you down or resurrect you completely. Clapperboard Part 10, Scorpio in love, devotion, intensity, and the power to heal or destroy. To be loved by a Scorpio is to never forget it. Ever. Fire love isn't a game to Scorpio. It's a sacred war. Scorpio doesn't date around. They don't kind of like you. They don't see where things go. When a Scorpio falls in love, it's all in. Body, mind, soul, past life, future memory. They merge. Their love is not a transaction. It's a surrender. A contract sealed in soul ink. This is why Scorpio love is unforgettable. Even if it ends, a part of you always remains marked. Because they don't just love you. They change you. The magnetism of Scorpio in romance. People are often magnetized to Scorpios without knowing why. It's in the way they look into your eyes and seem to see your secrets. Sit silently next to you, and yet make you feel completely known. Say little, but make every word echo in your bones. And that magnetism? It's not performance. It's presence. Scorpio doesn't chase. They pull. And once you're in orbit, it's hard to leave. Kiss mark the physical connection, sacred and intense. Let's talk about chemistry. Scorpio is ruled by Pluto and Mars, the planet of death and the planet of desire. That means their physical connection isn't just about pleasure. It's about transformation. To touch a Scorpio is to activate something deep in yourself. To kiss them is to experience silence and motion. To make love with them is to enter a space where time dissolves and ego disappears. They don't do casual. They do cosmic fusion. Brain, mental, and emotional depth. Love with X-ray vision. A Scorpio in love knows you. Not just your birthday or favorite food, but your emotional blueprint. They'll remember the way your voice changes when you're hiding pain. The exact look you give when you feel unworthy. The dreams you mentioned once, offhandedly, and then forgot. They never forget. Because once they love you, your soul becomes part of their territory. And they'll guard it fiercely. Brick, but they don't open easily. For all their intensity, Scorpios are cautious. They don't fall fast, they fall deep. And that means they test. They'll pull back to see if you chase. They'll go silent to see if you notice. They'll create emotional storms to see if you leave or stay. Not because they're playing games, but because they're asking, can I trust you with all of me? Even the parts I've never shown. If you pass, you're in. For real. For keeps. For eternity. Spider the dark side. Possession, jealousy, and obsession. Let's be honest. Scorpio love isn't light and breezy. It's consuming, enveloping, sometimes terrifying. They can be possessive, not out of insecurity, but out of soul binding. They can be jealous, not because they don't trust you, but because they feel everything. They can be obsessive, not because they're unhealthy, but because your presence lives in them now. Loving a Scorpio means being seen, claimed, and held to an intensity most can't sustain. But for those who can, it's heaven with fire. Broken heart, what happens when you break their heart? You don't just hurt a Scorpio. You shatter them. Because remember, they didn't just love you with emotion. They loved you with every life they've ever lived. And when that bond is broken, they don't always cry. Sometimes they go silent. Sometimes they go cold. And sometimes they go so deep within themselves, you'll never find them again. Not because they stopped loving you, but because something inside them died and they buried it with you. Dove, but when Scorpio loves right, they heal you. Now let's talk about the highest form of Scorpio love. When they feel safe, when they're with someone who meets their depth, they soften, they open, they heal, they become your emotional protector, your psychic mirror, your fiercest advocate. They'll remember your trauma and help you rewrite it. They'll notice when your energy drops and remind you of your worth. They'll believe in your dreams when you've stopped believing in them. Their love isn't pretty. It's holy. Gemstone to be loved by a Scorpio is to be reborn. Scorpio doesn't love to feel good. They love to transform. Their love breaks down your walls, forces you to confront your truth, awakens your soul, burns away what's false, and leaves you standing in the light, raw, real, and finally free. You won't come out the same, but you'll come out more you than ever before. And that's the ultimate Scorpio gift. Candle closing, and what's next? In part 11, Scorpio and their shadow, rage, revenge, and the path to redemption. We'll explore the dark underbelly of Scorpio, the side that emerges when trust is betrayed, when pain festers, and when their love is weaponized. Because when a Scorpio falls, it's either into transformation or into vengeance. Clapperboard Part 11, Scorpio and their shadow, rage, revenge, and the path to redemption. The shadow of a Scorpio is not evil, it's sacred. New moon where there is depth, there is darkness. Scorpio isn't just about emotional intelligence, mysticism, and loyalty. They are also the keepers of shadow. Every light they carry was forged in fire. Every truth they reveal was bought with pain. And when Scorpio is betrayed, when they're wounded deeply, humiliated, or abandoned, they don't just feel it, they become it. And that pain doesn't always sit quietly. Sometimes, it fights back. Fire the rage of a wounded Scorpio. When Scorpio feels betrayed, the fire inside them doesn't flicker. It explodes. Not in screaming matches, not in social media rants, but in surgical silence or devastating truth bombs. They won't attack recklessly. They'll wait. They'll watch. And when the moment is right, they'll strike where it hurts most. Their rage isn't chaotic. It's intentional, strategic, icy hot, because Scorpio doesn't lash out to vent. They lash out to reset the balance. Scorpion, why they seek revenge. Let's be honest, Scorpio can be vengeful, not because they enjoy cruelty, but because betrayal feels like spiritual murder. They gave you their soul. You stomped on it. So their shadow says, you need to feel what I felt. They don't want to destroy you. They want to restore justice. And when that hunger for vengeance takes over, it's terrifying. Not because they're out of control, but because they're exactly in control. Brick story, the Scorpio who cut deep. There was a Scorpio man named Cal who was in love with a woman who cheated on him with his best friend. He didn't yell. He didn't post cryptic messages. He didn't beg. He simply disappeared. And within a month, both the woman and the friend lost access to every circle Cal ever introduced them to. Their reputations, connections, and influence vanished. Later, someone asked Cal, was that revenge? He said, no, that was closure. I just removed the access they were abusing. That's Scorpio. Quiet, cold, calculated, not to harm it, but to reclaim power. Water wave, but that darkness has a cost. Here's the thing, Scorpio's shadow doesn't just punish others. It punishes them too. When they hold on to rage, it turns into resentment, corrodes their joy, closes their heart, disconnects them from their higher path. Because deep down, Scorpio knows. Vengeance doesn't bring peace. It only prolongs the pain. They may win the battle, but they lose a piece of their light. And that's the tragedy. The same intensity that fuels their love, fuels their vengeance. Candle the turning point, choosing redemption. The moment Scorpio begins to heal is the moment they ask themselves, is this rage still serving me? Am I still punishing them, or just myself? What would it mean to let go? And slowly, painfully, they begin to turn inward. Not to forgive what was done, but to free themselves from its grip. Because the truth is, forgiveness isn't weakness. For Scorpio, it's the most powerful rebellion of all. To release pain. When everything in your blood wants to hold on to it. That's sacred alchemy. Of the path to redemption. One hears how Scorpio transforms their shadow. 2. Acknowledge the rage, not as evil, but as a signal. 3. Feel the betrayal fully, without shame, without filters. 4. Extract the lesson. What was exposed? What died? What truth emerged? 5. Transmute the pain into art, action, or personal evolution. Forgive not for them, but for peace. This is not easy, but Scorpio is the only sign built for such inner death and rebirth. Balance scale from vengeance to wisdom. When a Scorpio rises above their shadow, they become wiser, softer, more powerful, and unshakably sovereign. Their silence becomes compassion. Their boundaries become sacred. Their energy no longer reacts, it transforms. And instead of asking, how do I make them pay? They now ask, How can I elevate from this? That's the true victory. Not destroying what hurt you, but becoming someone who no longer needs to. Lightbulb, the shadow was never the enemy. Scorpio's rage isn't their curse. It's their compass. It shows them where they've given too much, where they were blind, where they need to grow stronger. The shadow isn't to be rejected. It's to be understood, integrated, and redeemed. And when Scorpio does that, they become unstoppable. Candle closing, and what's next? In part 12, the Scorpio legacy, impact, influence, and immortality, we'll explore what Scorpio leaves behind, not just in memory, but in imprint. Because when a Scorpio touches your life, it's not just for a moment, it's forever. Clapperboard Part 12, the Scorpio legacy, impact, influence, and immortality. When Scorpio leaves, their presence stays forever. DNA legacy isn't what they build, it's what they awaken. Some people leave behind fame, others leave behind wealth. But Scorpio? Scorpio leaves behind transformation. You won't always remember what they said, but you'll remember how they made you feel, how they saw you, how they called out your truth, how they didn't let you hide behind your own illusion. Their legacy isn't carved in monuments. It's etched in souls. Candle, you don't just know a Scorpio. You remember them. Years after a Scorpio leaves your life, whether in love, friendship, or mentorship, you'll still feel them. You'll hear their voice when you try to lie to yourself. You'll remember their silence when someone else avoids your pain. You'll feel their gaze when you're tempted to settle for less than you deserve. They don't pass through your life. They embed into it. Because they don't love halfway. They don't support halfway. And they don't impact halfway. Milky Way, the emotional architect. Scorpio is the one who stood with you when no one else knew you were breaking, spoke the truth when everyone else offered comfort, believed in your strength while you still doubted yourself. Their role is rarely celebrated, but it's always remembered. They are emotional architects, designing new parts of you through their presence. And even after they're gone, what they helped build remains. Fabaluna's story, the mentor who changed everything. Jules, a young artist, once had a Scorpio mentor named Nora. Nora didn't flatter. She didn't sugarcoat. She saw Jules' potential and also her fear. One day, after Jules presented a watered-down portfolio to impress clients, Nora said nothing. She just looked at her and whispered, "I see the fire you're hiding, but if you hide it too long, it will die." That night, Jules cried. The next morning, she started again. Years later, Jules had her first solo exhibition, based on the shadow work Nora had pushed her to face. Nora never attended, but Jules left a candle in the corner of the gallery. That's Scorpio. Their impact lights fires in silence. Scorpion, why their absence hurts so much. Scorpio's departure is one of the hardest to endure. It's not because they were loud. It's because their presence was everything. The calm in the storm. The silence that felt safe. The soul that mirrored yours back to you, truthfully. When they walk away, it feels like a piece of the universe left with them. Because in many ways, it did. Coffin Scorpio and the immortality of influence. Here's the secret. Scorpio never really leaves. Even after death. Even after heartbreak. Even after distance. What they taught you, lives. What they helped awaken, grows. What they loved in you, becomes sacred. This is why Scorpio is the most immortal of the signs. Not in body, but in effect. Brain, you don't forget a Scorpio. You evolve because of them. Some people come into your life for comfort. Scorpio comes for transformation. They're not here to make it easy. They're here to make it real. And when the dust settles, you'll realize. They called you out because they believed in you. They held you accountable because they wanted you to rise. They left because you stopped respecting the sacredness of what you shared. And that lesson? It lives longer than any love. To the final gift, becoming your own Scorpio. When a Scorpio leaves, they don't leave you broken. They leave you rebuilt. Wiser, sharper, stronger, more soul-aware. Because they didn't just guide you, they initiated you. Into truth, into healing, into depth, into becoming. That is their gift. That is their legacy. Candle final reflection. What Scorpio teaches the world. If there is one thing Scorpio wants us to understand, it's this. You were not born to live on the surface. You were born to dive deep, to face your shadows, to burn what no longer serves, and to rise transformed. They are not here to be remembered for who they were. They are here to awaken who you could be. And that is immortality. Directed call to action, spoken from the heart. If this video stirred something in you, if you recognized yourself in these words, or you simply admire the unstoppable force of Scorpio energy, then let's keep going deeper together. Glowing stars, subscribe to this channel, The Path to Buddhist Wisdom, because here, we don't just talk about astrology. We awaken ancient truths. We merge mysticism with mastery. And we honor every soul's path to greatness. Hit that bell. Leave a comment. And remember, the most powerful journey is the one within.